Hi, good morning. Welcome. My name is Amy, and I am going to show you how I installed a drip irrigation system in my backyard. I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks I've kind of been learning throughout the process and maybe give you some insight on how you can work with the space that you have. My backyard is a little bit different shape and involved two zones. So I've got hanging baskets, I've got flower pots on the ground, a cucumber plant, raised beds with some tomatoes, some herbs and whatnot. So it was a little bit different layout than what I was finding on videos on YouTube. And so hopefully some things that I have to share with you will be beneficial and provide you a little bit of guidance if you're planning on setting up your own drip system in your backyard. So let's go.
I wanted to give you a little idea of the layout of my backyard and what we're working with and what we have to water. So right off my back patio door, I've got these two hanging baskets right here. Coming forward here, we have my cucumber plant, a large flower basket on the ground there, another one off over here to the right. We've got a hanging basket. I've got herbs on the bottom. I've got rosemary, two different types of thyme, mint, tomato plant there. These two large flower pots or hanging basket. I've got multiple fence top hanging baskets. I've got six tomato plants here in the raised beds, along with some bush beans that I just sowed the other day, and I'm very hopeful that those are going to do well. I'm pretty excited to see how those turn out. I've also got this hanging basket here in the corner, and then lastly, two more fence top hanging baskets. This beautiful hanging basket here, she's my favorite. I love her. And then lastly, this one right here.
So here's a little bit of a different perspective of my backyard that allows you to see my backyard is basically split into two sections. I call it the left side and the right side, also known as zone 1 and zone 2. Because I have my back gate there, I knew that I couldn't have a drip system going over the gate because I wouldn't be able to open it. So I knew that meant splitting this section into one zone and this section into another zone, which is totally fine because there are options to allow you to do that. You can split your irrigation system into multiple zones if needed. So the first thing I knew I needed to do was split my spigot coming off of the house into two sections, two different spigots, I guess you could say. So I wanted to maintain my own manual watering option. So I have my hose attached to that. And then coming off of the second one, I've got my drip system. So from that splitter, you want to do your timer. Okay. And then the timer, they make several different timers with many different options. I knew that I only needed a timer that splits into two. So that's how I was able to really divide my backyard into two separate zones, zone 1 and zone 2. Zone 1 goes this way, zone 2 goes that way. So you can see that I added a 90-degree elbow joint there. So those are installed everywhere where your hose is going to need to bend. This hose, this 1/2-inch hose, is very stiff, a little hard to work with, I'm not going to lie, but this is your main irrigation hose. This is the hose that's going to go along your fence line, along the ground, that's going to get staked into the ground. This is the main irrigation hose that you are then going to attach your 1/4-inch hose to. So keep that in mind. So I ran the 1/2-inch irrigation hose along the backside of my house. I used staples, lawn staples to keep that hose down and in place. And then up the fence, there's these little fittings that you can nail into the fence that keeps your hose straight and runs it all the way up the fence. Okay, as you can see, I did another 90-degree elbow joint. Now here's the first 1/4-inch hose that comes off your main 1/2-inch hose. There's a fitting. So you use a tool to poke the hole into your 1/2-inch hose, and then it links the 1/4-inch hose to your 1/2-inch hose. From there, I chose to go ahead and do a zip tie onto the hanging baskets hanger here, and then another zip tie to keep the hose in place. I chose this type of water emitter at the end, which I really like. It's an adjustable emitter, and you just kind of have to play around with it. I've got it to a point I can show you later in the video, but the way that it's watering the plant, I really, really like. It kind of mimics how I water with my own hose. So I really like how much water is coming out, the pattern it comes out in. So I'm really pleased with that. So I continued running that 1/2 inch hose down my fence. I felt like I needed 2 emitters in these longer baskets. These are a little bit tricky because you just don't want a lot of water coming out of the emitters. These baskets are very shallow, so they just don't need a ton of water compared to your larger hanging baskets, which are much deeper and need a little bit heavier watering. So I ran 2 emitters into these fence top hanging baskets. The same thing with this. I just used my zip ties to go ahead and hold that 1/4 inch hose in place with the emitter at the end, adjusted the emitter to my liking. And I really love the way that that one is watering. Same thing with this. I went and installed 2 emitters in here. Okay, now here comes the part where it took a little bit of brain power. I knew I had to get the irrigation down to my 6 tomato plants. And like I said, I also just sowed seeds for bush beans down here as well. So I knew I needed to get irrigation down here. And this is how I did it. So I installed this T-joint here in the corner. So I continued my 1/2 inch hose down the fence line and then also came down into my raised beds. From there, I stapled the 1/2 inch hose along the back and I just went ahead and did a 1/4 inch hose onto these bubblers that go to each tomato plant. Okay. So I really like how that turned out. I like the amount of water that comes out. I did have to adjust it, of course, but I think it's doing a really good job and it's providing just the right amount of water for the tomato plants. So kind of the same thing. I just followed the back fence, adding 2 emitters into each of the fence top flower baskets. Now, one thing to add here is when you reach the end of your 1/2 inch hose, okay, so I knew this was a stopping point, you need to add an end cap. This is what caps the hose off. Obviously, you don't want the water to continue, so you're going to cap that hose off wherever that hose is stopping. So there's one here at the end of that one on top of that fence, and there's one down in the raised bed. So what I just showed you was what I consider zone 2. That's actually zone 2 on the timer. And now we're going to get into zone 1. As you can see, I added another T-joint here because I knew I needed my 1/2 inch hose to continue up this beam here. So I kind of did the same thing as I would have done on my fence. I ran my 1/2 inch hose and I capped it off at the top. Off of this, then I added my 2 1/4 inch irrigation hoses that reach the hanging baskets, and I went with the same style. I've got the same emitter at the end as I do all my other hanging baskets. From here into my cucumber, I decided to go with the same emitter as I would use on my hanging baskets. I just feel like it really spread the water out nicely and was able to thoroughly water the entire plant as opposed to just like a little drip that I was afraid would not reach a good amount of the soil. So because this flower pot is large, I wanted to make sure I was covering the whole flower pot. So I actually went ahead and did 3 1/4 inch hoses to cover the whole pot. So I just took them from the 1/2 inch hose and I just kind of laid them in the pot evenly around the pot so I knew the whole thing was receiving water. I used the exact same emitters as I used in my hanging baskets. The same goes for this little guy. I used my staples to staple my 1/2 inch hose along the ground. Another T-joint in the corner because I needed my 1/2 inch hose to continue along the fence here. So from this bottom part, a portion of the T-joint, this goes along my raised bed here. I've got a hose reaching this tomato plant, my mint, my thyme, and my rosemary. And then of course I've got the same emitters going into my hanging basket. I went ahead and did 2 in this one. Looks like this one needs adjusted. You can see the emitter at the end. You just go ahead. I just laid it right there in the pot so it's evenly distributed. Love this flower. This is a super tunia with some million bells. Love the way this one turned out. This box was actually given to me as a gift at my baby shower a few years ago, and I repurposed it into a flower pot. I've continued this along the backside into my flower basket, and then it was a little tricky, but I just did 2 longer 1/4 inch hoses into this. I wanted the 1/4 inch hoses to be on the hinge side of the gate, and so the gate can still open and close with no issues. One thing that I did not really think about when setting up both zones to water is that when you have both zones 1 and 2 watering at the same time in the morning, let's say 5 o'clock in the morning, you set zones 1 and 2 for 5 o'clock in the morning to water for 20 minutes. I guess I just didn't realize that the amount of water pressure would significantly decrease. And so I was kind of adjusting the emitters and trying to get maximum output because it just didn't seem like a whole lot of water was coming out, especially when I got to the end of the irrigation system. So I don't know why it didn't occur to me, but one thing I adjusted is wait a minute, why don't I have zone 1 water at 4:30 in the morning and then have zone 2 water at 5 o'clock in the morning? And that was the way to go. So it completely changed the amount of water pressure coming out. The water started coming out at a rate that I was happy with. And so that was the key that I just didn't think about. So maybe this will help you on your journey and kind of give you an idea as to how you want to set up your timing. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I set that up on my timer. So on my timer here, you can see where you have zones 1 and 2. This is the current time here, and this is the next watering time that I have set up. So, okay, let's take a look at, so this is zone 1. It's saying at 4:30 in the morning, zone 1 is going to be watered, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, zone 2 will be watered. So here's how I did it. So this will always stay on the on position. You always want your faucet here to be turned on, and you always want your valve here leading to your timer to be turned on. This is what controls the water coming out. Okay. So if I want to change the time, what I did, I turned it to start time. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm on zone 1. Here's where I chose 4:30 for zone 1. Again, zone 1 is the part that covers only the hanging baskets, the cucumber, the large flower basket. It covers that side of the yard. So this starts at 4:30. How long do I want to go for? I really felt like 10 minutes was sufficient for those flowers. How often? Once every day. You can set this hourly, so I could do once every 6 hours, once every 12 hours, whatnot. But as for right now, we're not experiencing many really high heat days right now. I live in Oregon, and I think once every morning at 4:30 is sufficient right now. I can always change it, but this is what I feel is working right now. So then when I want to go back and change zone 2, my start time, I just click zone. You see it switches to zone 2, and now I've got a 5 o'clock watering time for zone 2. How long? I'm doing, I am doing for zone 2. I'm going to try 10 minutes for zone 2 as well. How often? Once a day. Okay, one time every day. And so then you just put it to on. In order to give you an idea of what it looks like as my plants are being watered, I figured I would go ahead and put this in manual mode and show you how that works as well. So I want to do manual mode here, hold this down, and we're going to do zone 2. I just want to show you zone 2 right now for 10 minutes. So we go ahead and hit that again. Make sure you're on zone 2 and click OK. Okay, that clicks on, you can hear it. So now let's take a look. All right. This is how the water comes out. I am really happy with that. I like how it covers a majority of the basket. Can't really see these, but these are more of a drip. My favorite hanging basket here, we want to make sure she's watered well. We've got this hanging basket here. The tomatoes, these are bubbler emitters. And I don't know, for me, this is just the right amount of water that comes out. And I felt like with 10 minutes, this would be a sufficient amount of water for my tomato plants. Let's go ahead and take a look at zone 1 and how those are watering. So we want to turn this on. We want to hold down manual. We want to make sure we're on zone 1. Look it to zone 1. Oh, that's on both. There we go, zone 1. All right, here we go. Let's go take a look. I'll give that a minute to go ahead and start. Okay. I think this is absolutely perfect. I love that pattern. Love how much water is getting distributed. Now this again, this just lays in the basket and just evenly distributes the water throughout that plant. And I've got 3 of those in this large one. So I've got one in the back, one over here. I've got one in this little guy. Oh, I went ahead and did a bubbler in this one. I like how that is working. This one, you can't really see it, but there's uh, this type of emitter on that. Okay. So that one is working. This one again, I've just got it laying down in the plant. So now that I've walked you through the process of setting up your irrigation, I just wanted to recap by going over a few things. So I would say the key part to starting this project, try not to get overwhelmed. I'm not gonna lie, I was completely overwhelmed to start, and I think that that's why I put it off for so long. It just almost seemed unattainable, especially to do by myself. It just seemed like too big of a project to take on. I was very overwhelmed, and I had a lot of doubt as to whether or not I would be able to do this by myself. Um, Once I got going, the more information I had and the more I learned about it, I thought, you know what, I can absolutely do this by myself. It might take a little while, but in the long run, it's going to save me so much time and money. And it's not going to kill my plants. When our family goes on a fishing trip once a year in August, and I don't have anyone that is able to come water my flowers, nor would I expect them to. So setting up this irrigation system, this drip system to automatically water my plants and flowers, this is going to be the best thing for me. My backyard space absolutely brings me so much joy, and the thought of my flowers and my plants dying, that is just something I can't even think about. So that is not an option. So um, being educated, learning as much as I can, that was very helpful. And then, you know, once you're ready to get started, I drew myself a map of my backyard. I kind of laid out how I thought my irrigation pattern should go. That was extremely helpful because it helped me understand how many of each joint I would need. And so I wasn't going to Home Depot or Amazon and buying all these extra parts I didn't need or I didn't have too little. Honestly, I did not have to go back one time. I had everything I needed. I had a little extra, but it can be returned because they were not open. So that was not a big deal. So there is nothing worse than starting a project and then finding out multiple times throughout that project that you have to go back to Home Depot and get more parts. I just am someone who once I start a project, I'm just focused and I just want to get it done. So it took me about 8 hours. I will say it probably wouldn't have taken that long, but I was just kind of figuring out some tools I could use to get the little inserter to go into the 1/2 inch tube, stuff like that. It may not have taken so long. I did take some breaks because it got pretty hot the day I was doing it, but I did not have any help. I did it by myself and it took me about, I want to say around maybe 8 hours. So it was a day project for me. And again, it just saved me so much time and saved all my plants and vegetables. And I have a lot of peace of mind now, and we're ready to go on vacation. So the next step is just understanding what works well for your garden. Everyone is different as far as how hot it is where you live. Here, we're having a pretty mild summer, which is quite nice. So right now, watering once a day is completely sufficient. Um, if it were to get really hot and I knew that was coming up, I would probably change my watering to maybe twice a day. But right now, once a day is fine, but it may be different for you. So just kind of playing around with um, the amount it's watering, how often it's watering, how long you need it to water, playing around with that. That's just going to kind of take some time and adjusting. And I am sure I will continue adjusting mine as I go. So right now, I feel like it's in a good spot. I like how it's set up right now. So it's working well for me. But like I said, it may take some more adjusting in the future. So who knows? You just roll with the punches. And if Mother Nature wants to get up to 100 degrees, then we're going to be making some changes. I hope this video has been helpful and maybe a little bit informative for you, and maybe even given you the courage and inspiration to try and take this on yourself. I will say you can absolutely do it. You can do it by yourself. Just set aside a day. It will probably take you a good portion of the day. I mean, like I said, my backyard is pretty small, but it it took me a day, and I am so glad I did it. And I really, really hope that I have given you a little bit of knowledge and inspiration that it takes for you to do it in your own backyard. So please let me know if you decided to take on this project yourself and set up your own drip system. I would love to hear about it and love to answer any questions you have. I am by no means a professional. I am just learning myself. I don't know a ton about this, but I know enough where maybe I can be a little bit helpful in answering some questions. So, yes, please let me know if you decide to take on this project yourself. Have a good day, everyone. God bless. Bye.